Hello, I'm Karen Christensen. Have a little time today before, the thunders just started. I don't know if this will interfere. We apparently have some severe thunderstorms coming, but I'm going to keep going because I have a little bit of time now before I get on a call about podcasting. And then I have another call to do an actual recording about happy hours. So I had another conversation this morning that was about was about a lot of things. But one of the things we talked about was whether what question my friend asked was, is it possible to find a third place online? My immediate answer was no. And then I started to add there's some nuances to that, because though I certainly wouldn't say that anything online is going to have all the qualities of an authentic third place. There certainly are experiences online that have some of the key qualities, and we all know that there are times we can't find a third place because of where we live, because of because the people we'd like to hang out with are far away. It's one of the downsides of the incredibly interesting global lives we're able to lead today. We don't just live in the same village all our lives and stroll down to the pub. As attractive as that is, that's also limiting. And I have to admit that when I was young, I wanted a big, wide world and to travel the world, to have friends all over the world. And I really wasn't thinking about what that would mean in terms of kind of the social side of daily life over time. But we are much better. So anyway, I'm thinking this if I were with you in bar or a coffee shop or a tea house now, it's late afternoon, we're pouring a cup of mint tea or chai or asking for a beer, what would I have on my mind that I'd want to ask you about, talk to you about, kind of noodle over? And it really is this question of what's possible online, because here I am online, of course, talking to who knows who, but I'm talking to people who read my newsletter, who send me emails, whom I've met over the years, people who sometimes I haven't seen or communicated with in some long time, but I still feel a connection with. Actually, I heard from someone today, and I'm going to talk to him next week. I haven't seen him since 2005. I haven't been in touch with him since not long after that, I would think. But his name has cropped up frequently to do with one of my projects, and we have a mutual friend. I've sometimes asked about him. So these are the kind of connections we have today. And I do think we've become, if you think back to the beginning of the pandemic and how awkward people were on Zoom, I can remember the women biographers group that I belonged to. It was hilarious and incredibly awkward because people were on mute and they didn't know how to turn this on. It was just everyone was fumbling around and also overlapping in conversation. And I got to thinking about that after my call today with a fellow who was very much online, because I think people are much more competent, not just technically, in terms of using the software and all, but in terms of, say, pausing, letting not overlapping, letting the other person speak. But in a real third place or in a real meeting, a real setting, there's lots of overlapping. And I was remembering that one of the innovations of the TV show Hill Street Blues was that it was much more like real life. not just in the camera work, but because they let people, there would be multiple people talking. It wasn't like a play script where you have one person speak and then the next person speaks and then there's a response, where the dialogue is set out very neatly. And of course, when you write dialogue in a novel, it tends to be like that, where in fact, in real life, when you have several people there or a group, think of a table of 8 and there's conversation going on. Sometimes, there's a little side conversation, which are really important. Actually, side conversations, really important. They can be distracting, but they also can be very useful. And so I worry that some of the mannerisms and skills we've used to do online conversation more effectively might actually diminish our skills in real life, which is a problem with all the technology we use, actually, because we kind of limit our human capacity to fit the technology, where originally it was supposed to be computers were supposed to fit us. And so I'm thinking about that, and it's worth, I'd love to know what other people think, if they've experienced that improvement, but does it affect our ability to converse in a really lively way in real life, especially with a group? And third places are generally groups. Ray Oldenburg and I talked about what an optimum number was, because there's research on how many relationships you can maintain, how many relationships are desirable, what makes a village, how many people we can have biographical knowledge of, how many people we can hold in our heads. And we thought ideal group ranged from 8 to 10, maybe a little bigger. It really does depend, but getting up to 8 seemed, I said to Ray that 8 was a lucky number in China, and often the round tables you get in China are really 8's a good number to go around fairly a really usual size of dinner table. And it's a nice size for a group, a lot of variety, but not so many people that you can't have a general conversation as well as some side conversations. But if we were meeting today, there are a couple things that I would be asking you about your experience. One of the things that led me to talk to this colleague this morning was that we had exchanged notes about an online kind of listserv, a Google group that we're on that has to do with digital publishing. And he had wanted to have some meetups, and I'd said I was curious about how they had gone. And I said that I'd once joined a women-only meetup. This list served a lot of men, far more men than women. And it was nice, it was pleasant, it was fun. We all seemed to enjoy it, but no one organized another one. And I've had that kind of experience a couple times. This was during the pandemic lockdown. And he said he had too, that somehow, even though it seems, enjoyable, that somehow it's too heavy a lift to organize it again. And maybe it's just the fact you have to organize it. And one of the things about a third place, a neighborhood third place, is you don't have to organize anything. The end of the workday, you shut down your computer or you finish supper and you just say, go walk down to the pub. Or in the morning, if you're the sort of person who likes to meet in the morning, it's something you do. You don't have to text in advance. There's no meeting times to worry about. You don't have to look up the hours. You know them. It's long hours are really, really helpful with a third place, and certainly non-working hours. So early or definitely evenings, which is one of the reasons that libraries are not ideal by any means for social socializing because they tend to be open at the wrong times. And rather than try to fit people into those hours by drawing them with events, you really want places that will be open and available at the times that are convenient for, for people to hang out when they relax. I mean, I know that even I had this conversation this morning and it went on longer than we'd planned. It was going to be 30 minutes and it was getting on for an hour. And I was like, I have to get back to work. Where I this was because the person I was talking to is in Asia. So for him, he was just hanging out in the late evening, no problem. And the time does really matter if you're gonna relax. It's not that you're gonna spend the whole evening necessarily. You might just, pop in, as Ray said, it's often, if you're a regular, it's a place that you're able to stop by because it's convenient. You might stop in for half an hour. I've been in places where that's clearly the case. Just wanted to stop by and say hi, or wanted to check on this, or see if so and so's around. And that's what a third place should be like. The other thing that's come up, and that's going to come up in my next conversation, I again online. I'm sitting in my office in Massachusetts with the thunderstorm outside. The other thing that's coming up is the idea that you can figure out in advance who you should be talking to. It's kind of like the idea that you can develop online friendships like online dating or find a partner online. That my colleague was saying, if we have AI, it can figure out, read our emails if we sign up, and it can figure out what our interests are and what our kind of communication style is, and then put people together, can suggest meetings and even arrange the meeting. I thought, geez. I said, "Call me a skeptic," and I could have said something much more emphatic, but I was lying, and I think it was being recorded too. So I didn't, but asked him to look up the word propic propinquity. I'm gonna have to practice this. I think I'm gonna develop a tongue teaser. It's a perfect word for a tongue teaser. Propinquity, which is the friendships that develop, the relationships that develop simply because you're in proximity, because you spend time together. And if we think about it, that is the way most of our closest friendships develop, because we're at college together, we're in the same dorm, we're in the same classes, that in some way, or at work, we're shoved together with people we didn't choose. And, one of my oldest friends is someone I just happened to end up in a room, renting a room next to her. And we're very different. But over time you develop these relationships, and I think these are the limits of technology. Plus, what about the way people look, the way people sound? Do you like their voices? What about eye contact? The communication you get through eyes. And that is another thing with online communication. Eye contact is of enormous importance in human life. And it doesn't happen. You cannot make eye contact online. It's not there. I can try and look at I can look at the camera so I look like I'm looking at you, but I'm recording this with a video, and I am not going to use the video because I know it will be lousy. I mean, I'm sure people practice this and they are much better at it than I am. And I would definitely not use my own until I'd practiced a hell of a lot more than I ever have. So maybe that next year, the year after, or never in my lifetime. But the idea that you can that you can know in advance everything you're looking for, or that a computer, or I think that's probably the idea of traditional matchmaking, that in fact another human being out, separate from you and separate from anyone else, will say, these two people, they they would, fit well together. They would like each other. So introductions are really important. And obviously we can make introductions by email. Do that all the time, don't we? But sometimes those work. My one single attempt at matchmaking was an enormous failure, and I was blamed for it. So I wouldn't go there again, that's for sure. But but I think I was being a little superficial. These people were roughly the same age. They were both writers. They were both Jewish. Uh, it 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 seemed like at least worth their meeting. But I think actually my friend, the woman, got a little overexcited about it, and so when she she found out this guy who was an environmentalist in New York and suggested that they take a bus to wherever they were going out together, she was so offended by the bus that I think was the end of that budding friendship. Too bad. But what I'm thinking of is the relationships we develop at college, at work, and I read a most interesting article about some politician who unfortunately was then pardoned by the current US president, but he wrote a rather nice essay about how he had been sent to prison for embezzlement, which of course he continued to deny, but about the friendships that he developed with other inmates. And he said that the fact that they were there together in proximity, that the effect of propinquity propinquity had was really transformative for him in terms of his thinking about people and who he could get along with and have find happiness with, the joy of friendship. And I thought that was really touching, and it made me think about other examples, people being shipwrecked together and finding ways to cooperate and finding that they really care for one another. On the other hand, I thought, well, there's then the whole concept that we saw in Lord of the Flies, where the bad leaders take over and factions develop and all hell breaks loose. So I'm not trying to idealize this, but I'm saying that we should not underestimate the effect of proximity and duration and the joy and interest that we can get from being with people who we're just thrown together with, who are different from us. They expand our minds, they expand our lives, they expand probably our emotional range too. And that is no question that those are the things that we look for in a third place, and those are the things that will draw other people there. When there's a joyous experience being had by the people who are already there, other people are going to want to join in, and so the whole experience becomes richer, more interesting, and more enduring. Those are my thoughts for the day. I wish we could talk this over in person and see what your experience is. I would love to hear about any examples that you have, and I thank you very much for listening. Thanks for joining me at The Way We Live Now, where we roam the world for ideas and inspiration. Please leave a comment and subscribe to the newsletter at KarenChristensen.substack.com.